take a moment and make sure your paper is labeled just like this. And then we're going to start talking about our new strategy for solving in lesson 13. So we're going to start talking about what we've learned so far. So the strategies that we've learned so far have been things that we have done with both sides of the scale. And when we've been on both sides of the scale, we have either taken things off both sides of the scale at the same time, or we have added things to both sides of the scale. So for example, you know that you can take off a shaded triangle off both sides. You can take off a star from both sides. So that kind of means if you have a scale, right, and you have your two shaded triangles, you can take one off the left and one off the right. You can do the same thing with your star. You can take one off the left and one off the right. And those are things that we've done to both sides. We've also been able to take numbers off both sides. So when you've had, we'll just add on to this one. If you've had a 10 over here, and a 12 over here, we can take 10 off each side and leave our 2 remaining. Okay, so those have been some of the strategies we've learned. I am going to move my added over just a little bit to the right, because what I'd like to do is make a line. Okay, make a kind of a little T-chart. The other thing we've been able to do, and we just learned, is that we can also bring in things on both sides of the scale. So far the only things we've brought in is we've been able to bring in a shaded triangle on each side in order to help solve. We've also added a star to each side when we've needed one. Okay. So that's kind of a little mini review of most of the strategies that you have for solving. There is something we have done though to just one side of the scale to help us solve. And that is that we have been able to take off a 0 pair off one side of the scale. So we know that 0 pairs are only 0 when they're being added together. So if we are adding, which happens on the same side, if we are adding a shaded and an unshaded, we're able to take those off. Well, believe it or not, we're going to be filling in this last blank today. We're going to find a situation where instead of taking away a 0 pair on one side of the scale, we're going to be adding a 0 pair to one side of the scale. Okay, and we'll see what that looks like in just a minute. The first problem we are going to look at is 2x minus star equals 12. So the reason that this is unique and it's a situation we haven't had before has to do with our job of following orders. This problem asks us to put 2 x's on the scale, and then what it asks us to do is to take away a star. Well, when I look at my scale, I don't have a star to take away, but I know that I have to follow orders in order for the problem to be correct. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in the only thing I know that will not change the weight of the left side of my scale. And what I'm allowed to bring in is a 0 pair. The reason I'm allowed to do that is because the total weight of these two things when they come in together is 0. And so I am not making the left side of the scale any heavier than it was. I'm bringing in something that equals 0. What that allows me to do then is to follow orders, and now I have a star to take away. And on my right side, I just have a 12. I'm going to do a rewrite now because I've gotten a little sloppy here. And what I end up with are 1, 2, 3 shaded triangles that equal 12. I'm going to show that. 1, 2, 3 shaded triangles that equal 12, meaning each shaded triangle equals 4. In other words, x equals 4. Okay, I know that concept is a little much, so we're going to try several examples together, and then you'll also have a chance to follow along with me in the practice problems if you need to. So, letter B says x take away 3 stars plus 2 is equal to 8 minus 2x. Okay. I'm going to build my scale. I'm going to leave a little extra room because I see now that I'm bringing in more things than I used to, so I might need that extra space. And I'm going to remember that my setup is simply following orders with my triangles and my number cubes. So the very first thing that I'm supposed to do is make an X on the left side, so I'm going to do that. The next thing I'm supposed to do is to take away 3 stars. I don't have any stars to take away, but I know that I have to follow orders. So I'm going to bring in the only thing I can think of that will not make the left side any heavier and not tip my scale, but will allow me to follow orders and take away 3 stars. What I'm going to need to do is to bring in 3 stars, but I'll need to bring them in as 0 pairs because a 0 pair adding up to 0 will not make the left side any heavier, and it will not tip the scale down. Now what I can do is I can follow orders and I can take away 3 stars. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. And then I'm going to add in a 2. Okay. On the right side, I'm to put an 8 on the right, and then it tells me to take away 2 x's. Well, I don't have any x's here to take away, so I'm going to use the same strategy I used here. I want to bring in x's on this side, but if I bring in 2 x's alone, I'll tip the scale and the right side will now be heavier because these 2 x's weigh something. I'm not sure what it is yet, but they weigh something. If I bring in instead 2 0 pairs, now I haven't changed the weight of the right side at all. And what I can do is I can follow orders and I can take away 2 x's. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to circle these 2 pieces in blue so that I can match up in my mind that the reason I crossed off these 3 stars was because my setup told me to, and the reason I crossed off these 2 x's is that my setup told me to. Now I'm going to do a rewrite because things are just getting really sloppy here and I need to figure out what my next step is going to be. So left over here I've got 4 x's and a 2, and I've got an 8 and 2 stars. So one of the strategies we learned earlier is that if I can handle my numbers first, then I can kind of see what I want to do with my triangles. So I'm going to cancel 2 on each side and leave myself with 6 on the right. And because my 6 is here, I think what I'd like to do is get rid of these stars so that I can just figure out how many triangles add up to 6 or how much each triangle is. So I'm going to do another thing where I bring things in. I'm going to bring in 2 X's on the right. And if I do that because they weigh something, I'm going to have to bring in 2 more X's or 2 more shaded triangles on the left. I'm going to do one more rewrite just to make sure that I am being neat. Looks like I've got 6 over here and a 6 on the right, which means each shaded triangle is 1 or X is 1.